Hi, and welcome to the 5th episode of the YEP Show.
They want to weaken our democracy.
So at one point you need to decide between one of the two, no?
Romania faced a deep political crisis.
They're private companies who want to make money.
This one is easier, jazz or rock?
This one is not so easy.
The Romania.
As social media now represents a significant part of our daily content consumption, 42% of Europeans aged 16 to 30 cite it as their main source for political and social news. Consequently, foreign interference in national elections has become a growing concern in Europe. The recent elections in Romania and Moldova have been emblematic examples of this. What is the EU doing to prevent social media from being flooded with foreign propaganda? And what is the current state of Moldova's path to EU membership? To dive into the topic, I am joined today by Lorena, press trainee at the EPP Group from Romania. Hi Lorena, thank you for joining us.
Hi Daniel, thank you.
Lorena, let's start from the beginning, meaning the last presidential election in Romania, which were held in May, and saw the centrist candidate Nicu Jordan coming as a winner. Can you tell us something more about the elections?
Yeah, of course. So, the pro-Western independent candidate, who is also the former mayor of Bucharest, Nicu Jordan, won the presidential elections in May this year, obtaining almost 54% of votes after his opponent, George Simion, had won by a large margin the first round. For those who do not know, George Simion is the leader of a far-right Romanian party, which is represented by the ECR in the European Parliament and has been declared persona non grata in Ukraine and Moldova. Pro-European and anti-corruption messages were instead the main weapons of Nicu Jordan's campaign, in addition to concrete measures to strengthen Romania's defense capacity and also diplomatic support for Ukraine. Nicu Jordan also wanted his first official visit as president of Romania to be in the Republic of Moldova, underlying the special relationship between the two neighboring states. However, before getting here, as we all know, Romania faced a deep political crisis.
Yeah, because these elections came 6 months after another election was held in Romania for the same presidential election, but it was annulled because one of the candidates committed fraud. Who is Georgescu and what did he do to fraud the elections?
Well, first of all, Romania was the first European Union member state to cancel its presidential elections due to foreign interference. Călin Georgescu, the far-right independent candidate who barely registered in opinion polls, unexpectedly won the first round of presidential elections. However, reports indicate a number of 85,000 cyber attacks during the electoral process, and also 25,000 accounts created on TikTok with the aim of supporting Călin Georgescu. Just to give some context, Călin Georgescu is a former United Nations bureaucrat known for spreading conspiracy theories, including anti-NATO and anti-European Union ones, and for supporting messages favored by the Kremlin. In fact, he has been charged with 6 criminal offenses, including anti-constitutional acts and misreporting of finances, following the zero expenses declared for last year's campaign. The charges also revolve around his support for sympathizers of the Iron Guard, which was a fascist and anti-Semitic movement and also a political party, which is illegal under Romanian law. So many criticized the decision of the Constitutional Court to cancel the presidential elections and also to reject Călin Georgescu's candidacy for the following ones, claiming that all this does not meet the European standards of democracy. However, the presidential elections were spoiled by the violations of the electoral rules, including the lack of transparency and fairness for the other candidates, but also for the citizens' votes.
Thank you very much, Lorena, for this overview. Now it's the time to go on speaking about this by introducing our guest of the day. Vice President of the EPP Group and Member of the European Parliament from Romania, Siegfried Muresan, is with us. Hi, Mr. Muresan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Mr. Muresan is chairman of the delegation to the EU-Moldova Parliamentary Association Committee and has been very vocal against Russian foreign interference in the EU. Mr. Muresan, speaking about both foreign interference and the power that social media have to influence national elections, Romania is an emblematic example of what can happen. What the Georgescu situation is teaching us?
So look, Romania is a NATO and EU member state. Russia has interfered with our presidential elections last year. It has tried to interfere with this year's presidential election as well. The important conclusion is this is not a singular case. We have seen in recent years Russian interference intensifying. We saw it in presidential elections in the Republic of Moldova. We saw it in Georgia last year. To close EU partner countries. One of them continuing on the pro-European path, the Republic of Moldova, due to the strong response of Moldovan authorities. The other one, Georgia, basically failing due to the fact that the authorities pretended to defend European values, rule of law, free and fair elections, but in reality they were closer to Russia than to democratic standards. And of course we saw Russia trying to interfere with elections in other EU member states. So the first important thing to say is expect Russia to interfere with any significant election in EU member states in the upcoming years. They want to weaken European institutions, they want to weaken our democracy, because they don't want our model, which is based on strong citizens, strong independent institutions, to succeed, because the more successful we are, the more obvious the contrast with their failed political system is. In Romania, we saw them supporting, favoring a candidate which was an extremist, which was a populist, which was a radical and an anti-European candidate, who, by the way, now is investigated for severe misconduct for several crimes. So for them, supporting a presumed criminal, someone breaking the law, is rather the norm than the exception. So this is why we need to be aware. We need to protect our democracy. We need to cooperate better in Europe to be able to reduce the magnitude of that interference. And obviously we need to update our legislation as well, because technology evolves. They would make use of this evolution. Their tools are becoming more sophisticated. We have to react also in terms of legislation.
If I may, was there any interaction between the Romanian government and TikTok over what happened?
There was. The Romanian authorities were in a formal dialogue with the platform which the pro-Russians used most. So the platform which they use most is TikTok, which is the weakest link. The norms there are the weakest, and the risk that people are being manipulated is high, because it's very much based on videos. Filters are not proper. So TikTok is the platform that one should not believe that you're informing yourself. You are very often misinformed, you are used, you are misused and abused there. So TikTok is the most dangerous platform. Romanian authorities were in dialogue with that company, and so were European institutions, with very limited success. This is why the European Commission launched a formal investigation against TikTok December last year. Truth is, those are non-cooperative companies. This is why the best way is to protect ourselves ex ante, strengthen legislation, but also inform, educate people. So strengthen legislation, set up clear rules, but also inform, educate people so that they don't fall victim to the algorithms there. Specific attention to the education of young people, obviously, but also to their parents, because frankly speaking, parents were used to protect their kids offline. They knew how to educate their kids for an offline world, but parents, with the digital skills that they have acquired some time ago, are not capable of protecting their children online. They do not know the risks. They do not realize, how kids are being radicalized, and frankly speaking, they do not know what their child is doing when away from home, or even at home with a closed door. So parents need to be taught. They need to guide, to mentor kids, and they need to be taught how to recognize if a child is being radicalized or victim of disinformation, fake news, propaganda.
But when you say that these companies are not cooperative, are you referring to the fact that it is because TikTok is Chinese, or because in general, this kind of platform tend to not cooperate a lot with the European institutions?
Look, I mean, who are these platforms? What are they? They're private companies who want to make money. The more, the better for them. So their primary objective is to make more money. For them to make more money, they need us to spend more time on those platforms. If you're asking yourself, what is the product that you are buying as a user on that platform? The answer, unfortunately, very often is, well, we as users are the product. Because what these platforms do is they sell our data to other private companies who use it for marketing purposes and so on. And so the scope of that companies is for us to spend as much time as possible on the platforms. For us to keep us there, they would keep on showing us those messages which they believe interest us. And that's also a form of radicalization, because they wouldn't give you an objective, assessment of the whole situation. They would just give you the one bits and pieces that they believe you're most interested in. So you're not seeing the whole picture. You're just seeing your part of the world. You don't have any checks and balances, and basically you get radicalized. You are permanently receiving confirmations that what you believe is right and everyone else is wrong. So the rifts, the polarization in the society is increasing. So they want to make more money. For that, they want us to spend more time there. To achieve this objective, they would basically continue to tell us the same thing. And this is why any form of regulation, any limitation to their possibility to profile or take down fake news, disinformation, they would obviously oppose. So this is why we have to strengthen legislation. We have to inform people better. Some oppose it more, some oppose it less. TikTok is particularly bad. You mentioned China. One more sentence on China. Look, we've also observed that autocratic regimes around the world cooperate to weaken democracies and democratic standards around the world. Iran, China, Russia, Venezuela. We're seeing intensified cooperation. So China is not the innocent element here in the room, for sure.
Sure. One last point on this, because so I have the feeling that sometimes the EU institutions and politicians in general want the platform to do two things at the same time. One is to live in free speech on the platform, and another one to be responsible of the content which is published. So, like, how do you keep the two things together? So at one point you need to decide between one of the two, no?
Look, firstly, it's obvious that there should be rules online as there are rules offline, right? And if when you try to cross the street, you know that if traffic light is on red, you cross. If it's on red, you stop. If it's on red, you stop. Always, when you see red around, you stop, right? So if you see red, you stop. If it's green, you cross. Is that limiting your freedom of movement? Obviously, it's not. It's a rule that is needed to ensure the freedom of movement of everyone, When to meet, there needs to be an order on how we cross so that we can both cross. It can't be that I always cross and you always wait. That's not how it works. Same needs to work online. We need rules. And let's remember, 50 years ago, when seatbelts started to being introduced, people were rebelling against them. They were seeing in a seatbelt a limitation of their freedom. Look, why should I be, basically pushed against my chair? Let me be free to drive freely. Well, meanwhile, we see it saves lives. The same is valid online. So what I'm trying to say is rules don't limit the freedom of speech. Rules ensure that all of us can speak freely without endangering anyone, without making use of violence, without anyone falling victim to violence. And in fact, we should not fall for the narrative of the extremes, which like to say, look, any rule is a limitation of the freedom of speech. No, it's not. Rules are there exactly to ensure the freedom, particularly the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech of everyone.
Mr. Muresan, another country which you mentioned before, which is Moldova, was suffering from foreign interference in their national presidential election as well, and also with the referendum to be a member of the EU. We recently also visited Moldova in Chisinau as YEP, and we met Maia Sandu as well for a very inspiring conversation. How bad was the Russian interference in those two pivotal moments for Chisinau?
The Republic of Moldova is a small country in the immediate neighborhood of the European Union. It's an EU candidate country geographically located between Romania, EU member state, and Ukraine. So herewith essential for the security of the whole European Union and also for the security of Ukraine right now. If westwards of Ukraine, Putin were to have an ally, we would all be in a more difficult situation. The Republic of Moldova is a country that is led in a very pro-European manner by the pro-European president that you have just mentioned, by a pro-European government supported by a transparent pro-European majority. It's reforming, it's respecting commitments made to Europe, became an EU candidate country. It wants to fulfill the criteria for joining and joining as soon as possible. So it is in our interest to work closely with them. You asked about the elections there and the interference. As I said, Russia very much wants to slow down the European integration process of the Republic of Moldova. It has tried in the past, it has failed, it will try again in the future. I believe it will continue to fail. Because Moldova is being led by a pro-European party in a pro-European manner, they cannot influence the government, they cannot influence the decisions of the parliament because there's a committed pro-European majority. So they are trying to change that by interfering with elections. Last year there were presidential elections and there was a referendum in which Moldovan people were called to express themselves on whether the country should become an EU member state, yes or no. And Russia interfered. Stakes were high for Russia there. They did vote buying. This was documented by independent investigative journalists and NGOs. So they bought more than 100,000 votes in the presidential election, which is a lot, which is almost 10% of the vote in the first round of the presidential elections. Moldovan authorities discovered that. They made it public. They acted swiftly. So the assessment is that the vote buying for the second round of the presidential elections was smaller. Then they supported anti-European, pro-Russian candidates. They spread fake news, disinformation, propaganda, and they are supporting, as I said, political parties and candidates who are anti-European and who are also trying through their narrative and actions to weaken the democratic standards, the rule of law in the country. So very active involvement. And of course, they're trying to influence the media landscape through some TV channels which would echo pro-Russian propaganda.
But why should the European Union be interested in having Moldova as a member state?
Look, it's a European country. It wants to join. In spite of Russian interference activities, the people have found the power to elect a pro-European president, re-elect her, elect a pro-European government, say yes in a referendum on EU membership. So Moldova wants to be close to us. It's a neighboring country. We can only be safe and stable if countries in our immediate neighborhood are safe and stable as well. And Moldova has shown its strategic importance also during the war in Ukraine. First weeks of the war in Ukraine, many millions of Ukrainian citizens fled the country, about 1 million through the Republic of Moldova, small country, relatively poor. People opened their houses to receive Ukrainian refugees, providing support and security to Ukrainian people in need, and same did the Moldovan authorities. That helped us stabilize the situation at the eastern border of the European Union, which was to the benefit of everyone in the European Union. So they acted on the basis of European values. They helped us protect Europe in difficult times. They want to join. It would mean a safer and more stable Europe for us as well. So what happens there and them joining Europe is not only in their interest, but it's in ours as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to answering to our question, Mr. Muresan. Now we are headed to our last game of the episode. We will give you two options to which choose, and you will tell us your preference. So, first question: would you prefer the US stopping all tariffs today, or every EU member state starting spending 3% of GDP in defense tomorrow?
Look, I think the two are linked. I think a strong economy and security are interlinked. So I think they are interlinked. I think the urgent thing is that we spend more on security and defense to discourage people who want to harm us from moving forward.
Journalists or lobbyists?
Journalists, always.
Negotiating with the left or negotiating with the far right?
Negotiating with the pro-European parties always, and if left means the pro-European center-left, then pro-European center-left. If left means anti-European extreme left, then I would say anti-European extreme left is as bad as anti-European extreme right. I would always negotiate with the pro-European. I have much more in common with them, no matter whether they are center-left or center-right, than I have in common with anyone who wants to destroy Europe.
This one is easier, jazz or rock?
This one is not so easy, you know, but okay, you know, then rather jazz, because if you say rock, there are things that I like, but there are also things that I would run away from, which are too heavy for me.
This is a tough one. Friptura or ciorba?
Look, ciorba is a traditional Romanian soup. I would rather take that. I would rather take a good soup. A good steak you can have everywhere, but a good Romanian soup I'd recommend to everyone.
A plenary session in Strasbourg or meetings in Brussels?
Look, plenary session in Strasbourg is much more intense. Getting to Strasbourg is difficult. Once you're there, it's nice. I think the plenary session is a place where you get more done in a day. It's intense. I like it.
And the final one, would you prefer vodka with Putin, tea with Xi Jinping, or arepa with Maduro?
With Maduro?
Yes.
Frankly speaking, none of them, you know. Neither the drinks nor the dictators, you know. Stay away from all of them.
Okay, we will.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muresan, for being with us today. It was a very inspiring conversation.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Lorena, for joining us today.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And thank you to our listeners. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Yep Show. Thank you for joining us today, and make sure to follow us on our social media.